3 on KT McFarland. I've been in Jerusalem and Israel all week, and the big question on everybody's mind is the peace process. Is the peace process dead? Joining me to discuss is Ambassador Dore Gold. He's the former Israeli ambassador to the United Nations and a close foreign policy advisor to a number of prime ministers. So let me ask you, Ambassador, is the peace process dead?
Well, KT, what you have to understand is that earlier this year, Secretary of State John Kerry tried to restart the peace process. He came up with something called a framework agreement, which he brought to Israel. Israel had its reservations, but it said, yes, let's try it. Then he brought it to President Obama, who invited the Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas to the Oval Office in March. In that meeting, in the Oval Office, Mahmoud Abbas said, I'll get back to you. So what do we have? Israel said yes. The Palestinians essentially said no. But nonetheless, Europeans at the UN, elsewhere, believe that to save the peace process, they should force something on Israel. They should unilaterally move ahead with recognition of a Palestinian state that hasn't yet been declared. They should have a UN Security Council resolution. This will not incentivize the Palestinians to say yes. In fact, it will set the peace process much further back.
Okay, so essentially Israel's at the negotiating table waiting for somebody to show up, and the Palestinians, instead of going to the negotiating table, they've gone to the international community and the UN, and they're requesting what, in a sense?
Well, they want the results of the negotiations decided already in UN resolutions. For example, borders have to be negotiated. That's what we signed in the Oslo agreements in the 1990s during the Clinton administration. But they want the resolution to say pre-1967 lines, maybe with a land swap here or there, but very small. And in any case, Israel is denied what it really needs in this kind of a Middle East, defensible borders, a border that allows us to defend ourselves by ourselves. Prime Minister is talking about Israel having to stay in the Jordan Valley, which Rabin called the security border of the State of Israel. And now there's pressure on us to give all that up at a time when ISIS is rising to the east and Iran is on the verge of getting nuclear weapons.
So is the Palestinian, the West Bank, are they trying to get statehood recognized by the international community then without any of these negotiations?
Absolutely. They're trying to move forward and unilaterally achieve the attributes of statehood. Now, there's a sequence here. Most countries unilaterally declare their independence, they get recognized by other countries, and then they go to the United Nations. Mahmoud Abbas is doing the exact opposite sequence. He's starting with the UN. At the same time, he's trying to get European countries to recognize his country, which doesn't exist yet, because the only way the Palestinians are going to get a real Palestinian state is if they negotiate with Israel. We need to have safe borders. They have their concerns. He's got to sit at the table and work it out with us, not run to the international community and think that he's going to get Israel on a silver platter. The Prime Minister has said he's not going to allow Israel to be served up.
Okay, what about the Security Council resolution at the UN? Where is that?
Well, that's been moving forward. There have been efforts by certain European countries like France to come out with compromise resolutions. We're saying, who needs these resolutions? The UN is not where you do business. You don't create states at the UN. You have states join the UN. And this is just going to make it much more difficult to negotiate. You can't put the results of negotiations in a UN resolution and think that that's going to help us get closer to an agreement between us.
Where are we a year from now?
Well, I think the real events in the Middle East are not related to the Palestinians. They're related to Iran. Iran is determined to become a nuclear power. They have the entire infrastructure for not just for civilian energy. They don't need it for that. They have oil, they have gas. They want to have nuclear weapons. We know it. Anyone who reads the reports of the International Atomic Energy Agency sees that they have plans to take the conventional warheads out of their missiles and put in a nuclear spherical device. That's written in an IAEA report. And therefore, we're concerned. And also, I believe the U.S. should be concerned because they are developing longer-range missiles. Our intelligence, U.S. intelligence, talks about ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. What do they need that for? And therefore, while we're talking about the Palestinians, while we're dealing with all these other issues, the Iranians are racing ahead, using the negotiations with the P5+1 to complete more and more aspects of their nuclear weapons program.
Ambassador Dore Gold, I must say that What I've heard this week in Israel is exactly what you've said, that the issue is much more about Iran as a potential nuclear weapons state than it is about anything else.
And one other thing, while we have these negotiations and everyone's discussing centrifuges, which is a real issue, and how much enriched uranium the Iranians have, look what's happening in the Middle East. You have Iranian boots on the ground in Syria, where they're killing Sunni Arabs. They have boots on the ground in Iraq, where they're trying to get large pieces of Iraq for the Shiite community. And now in Yemen, where a Shiite community, a Shiite militia known as the Houthi movement, has entered the capital of Yemen. Why should you care about Yemen? Because Yemen is at the naval choke point of Bab el-Mandeb, at the tip of the Red Sea. And it is that naval choke point through which 4 million barrels of oil move. So Iran is on a roll, and everybody else is preoccupied elsewhere.
Well, interesting times in the Middle East yet again. That's it for DEFCON 3. If you want to know more about what's going on in the Middle East, Iran's nuclear program, or what's happening with the Palestinian-Israeli peace talks, go to foxnews.com.